Jedi Joey. Welcome back to another video. How's everyone doing today? So today, we'll be reviewing Cobra Kai Season 6, Part 2. And what the holy fucking hell did we just watch? Because, man, is this insane. Like, these episodes were incredible. I've seen a lot of people kind of split on how they felt Cobra Kai has done storytelling-wise and how everything is gone. I wholeheartedly disagree, and I'm going to dive into this review. This will be one of my longest reviews ever, so I hope you guys are ready. We're going to be diving into the characters, my overall thoughts on Part 2. We'll do this pros and cons style, and I'll give you guys my nuanced take on Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2, but I'll also go away. I'll start with talking about, basically I'll do my overall view of Part 2, and then I'll start talking about individual sections. So the big question is, if you didn't watch my watch party, which thankfully guys, we had over 1.8k views in that watch party. Thank you guys so much. It was an amazing time. But if you guys didn't watch my thoughts and you know, I was so involved watching the show, you probably didn't get to hear my thoughts and everything full-heartedly. So with that being said, you might be asking what most people are saying. There's a lot of content creators saying, oh, I didn't like Part 2. Oh, I really did like Part 2. It's kind of very split across the board. For me, I absolutely loved Part 2. And it is some of my favorite Cobra Kai media storytelling we have ever gotten. Don't get me wrong. There are still some issues that I think could be done better. But overall, I loved it. And I can't wait for Part 3. So we're going to dive into this. So we'll start. So that's my overall view. I will go over my dislikes, and then we'll talk about the arcs and parts of the story I really enjoyed. So when we start with Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2, we pick up right where we left off, where we're at the Sekai Taikai, getting ready to start. We have one day of sponsors before the full matches start. Now, before we dive deep into the story of everything, because we know kind of what we know from the trailers and from the clips, we're going to focus heavily on the characters and talk about their arcs. So let's talk about the things I don't like first. Number 1, Samantha LaRusso. Okay, I love Sam, but there's a lot of things with Sam in Part 2 that really grinded my gears. So, for one, I just felt like that Sam, in the first couple episodes, she kept throwing Robbie under the bus. She was being very unfair to Johnny, I felt. I know that Johnny's way of, like, yelling at the kids wasn't right, but there was a better way for Sam to handle that, and just because she misses her dad and is worried about her dad, I don't think that justifies her to go and argue. I wish they would have, or to be mean to Johnny and to come after Devin after Devin was just defending her sensei. I think that was a little too teenage drama for my taste, personally. But I do understand that some people who really love Sam. I'm not saying I hate Sam in any sense of the word. I just think her character had some moments where it took me a little bit to get to where I saw where she was coming from. So for her, she's kind of my first L I have, my first issue. But I do think that she got better by episode 9 and 10, for sure. Then next up, the character that I would say arguably has made me mad ever since Part 1 to Part 2 now. And he started making me mad even in the earlier seasons, but I started coming around and really liking his character. Gianni, who plays Dimitri, is a great actor. So, take what I say, this is not an attack on the actor. This is only the character. I flippin' hate Dimitri, because this character started out a whiny little bitch. But then what happened was, and then he evolves and you like him and you see him in Season 4 and he has a great arc, and then in Season 5 he gets some pretty good stuff. And in Season 1, they flippin' shit all over his character, and it is just absolutely unacceptable. I don't understand. He was such a little prick in Part 1, and now in Part 2, he's a petty little prick. Like, I kind of thought the idea of the Bully Maguire arc with him was interesting at first, but I don't like him anymore because he literally... No, don't get me wrong. He wins me over a little bit in the end, but for a majority of this season, this freaking bitch is annoying. Like, he just whines and complains. Oh, boo, me and Hawk are fighting. Oh, I'm going to MIT. Well, as Hawk said, shut the fuck up, Dimitri. Like, come on, man. This is ridiculous. And then, one thing I want to talk about, one scene that I don't like is, bro, I could kind of just deal with your nonsense, and I knew you and Eli would make things amends, but what you did to Yasmin was unexcusable. Unexcusable. I don't even like Yasmin that much as a character. But I'm a person of integrity and loyalty. And I'm glad Hawk got in your face and told you what was up. Not only about MIT, but also what was up about being loyal to your girl. Because Hawk has been loyal to Moon since day one. Like, they broke up when they were having problems, but Hawk never cheated on Moon. Hawk was loyal to a fault. And I feel like he should be commended for that. Don't get me wrong. Eli also has some problems. Like, him and Dimitri's feud goes on for way too long. But then there's this amazing locker room scene in episode 9 that just brings everything full circle. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful Miyagi versus Cobra Kai for the final time. And it just is amazing. I loved it. And it was great for all the characters. But at least Dimitri and Eli were finally... And Eli has the balls to go to Dimitri and just finally just be like, hey, we need this to end. This needs to end now. And it needs to end soon. And I'm glad that it did. It went on for way too long. So I'm very happy that that finally ended and was handled in a mature and respectful way. Because it needed to end, it needed to be dealt with, and I'm glad that we handled it. But overall, for the most of the season, or most of part 2, I found Dimitri annoying. And so when I do my final score, you're going to see me take off some points for those specific things. For Samantha LaRusso and Dimitri. So then let's work our way up to, we'll build up, I want to focus on the big characters last, so we'll focus on the other aspects. So we'll focus on the other parts of the story, and we'll talk about the other stuff as well, as like the fight choreography and the music, all that stuff we get, but I want to get through the performances and the character arcs first. So, next up, we gotta talk about Devin. I hated Devin in part 1. Devin gets the most improved award for part 2. I thought she would either get injured or hopefully come and apologize. She has this amazing scene with William Zabka where she comes clean and then calls Kenny. And Kenny and her are starting to kind of build some sort of relationship. And I'll be honest, I kind of ship Devin and Kenny. I think I'd be about it. I really do. Like, and we're gonna talk about Kenny in a little bit, but I thought that they did a great job of giving her arc, doing it amazingly. And also, if you haven't figured it out already, guys, there will be spoilers in this whole review. This review will be long, but also spoiler-filled. So if you have not watched part 2, get the fuck out now. Like, because you don't want to be spoiled. It's Sunday. I waited long enough. This is what you get from me. You expect this. You know when I couldn't talk about part 2 without talking full spoilers. So, then as we move forward with the arcs, like I said, Devin, great. Love, even though she's getting the shit kicked out of her, I loved seeing her grow, and her scenes with everyone was great. And we'll be talking about Johnny overall later, because I do want to talk about how William Zabka has some amazing powerhouse acting in this part of the show. But, so, Devin's arc was great. Now, the next one, which is kind of the next one I want to talk about, we're not quite there yet. Alright, sorry. We talk about Devin. Let's talk about Kenny. Now, we're going to tiptoe over Kenny a little bit, because Kenny's arc involves another character that we don't want to really talk about quite yet. But we'll lean into it. So, Kenny's arc was interesting because Kenny had to patch things up with Anthony before he could ever kind of come in and join the Sekai Taikai. But, you know, Amanda has one of the best lines in the franchise after seeing Kenny and Anthony having their fight. She literally just gets so pissed off and goes, really? Freaking karate? I hate freaking karate. And then she goes and she pulls the two apart until, you know, Miguel's mom is in the hospital there's bigger things out there. We need to worry about other things, and convinces Kenny, and then Amanda convinces Kenny how cool it would be to go to the Sekai Taikai and come back to the Valley as a world champion. And I think that was really cool. And then, even when Kenny joins the team, even though we have a nice little short conversation with Devin, which some people had a problem with Devin forgiving him so much, with Kenny forgiving Devin so much, but Kenny doesn't hate Devin like he hates Anthony. So even though she technically poisoned him, I'm okay with the convenience of her forgiving him easily, because I don't think it was that big of a deal. And I was glad these two characters got the bond. It was nice when they joined. And then another part of the thing that bothered me about the Dimitri and Anthony, not Anthony, the Dimitri and Hawk stuff is the moment that Kenny arrived, just because he was with Silver before, everyone immediately assumes that Kenny's with Silver again. They immediately, and that's even when, because when Kenny comes into the show, Silver has also been reintroduced, which we'll talk about in a minute. Well, actually, longer than a minute, but, we'll get there. But, so anyway, Kenny comes in and has this powerhouse moment where he proves everyone wrong. He shows that he is this amazing fighter and deserves to be at the Sekai Taikai. And what I love about it is he literally does almost a Ninja Turtle roll over to Dimitri, gets in some cool fights, and the moment he does, he actually flicks off Silver. He does this really funny moment where he kind of cranks his hand up to do the middle finger, and then flicks off Silver. But instead of Silver getting mad, Silver looks proud at Kenny. Because even though he's in the wrong dojo, Kenny did what he always knew he could. And I was kind of amazed to see that little humility in Silver at this point. I thought that was really cool. And I really liked how Kenny handled that. It was awesome. And I love Kenny. I'm glad we got to see a lot more of him. We'll be talking about it a little bit more because his arc goes in even more interesting as we talk about what happened at the end of part 2. But so Kenny, great. Loved what they did with him. I can't wait to. I love that Kenny shined. I can't wait to see what they do with him more in part 3. Next up, we got to talk about. We already covered Dimitri and Eli. Let's talk about Tori. Okay, Peyton List had arguably one of the best performances in part 1. What Tori goes through in these episodes, they put her through the ringer once again, and I feel that Tori really struggles, coming off her mom dying. It really hits her hard, and, her heart isn't in this tournament. And we will talk about Robbie eventually as well, both Robbie and her struggle with similar things, but she has a new rival, Zara, which we'll talk about later, that really puts her on edge, and that's really interesting. But then also, Tori her arc, she struggles, because Peyton does have amazing acting, but I don't expect Tori to fight in the Sekai Taikai in part 3, honestly, because I just really don't know what her arc will be and what she's fighting for. Because when the tournament was getting serious, sorry guys, when the tournament was getting serious, she really did not give her all or feel like that she even deserved or wanted to be there. She was there because she wanted to deal with her emotions and fight like her mom wanted her to fight, but I think she's going to realize, especially after some of the events that happened at the end of part 2, that that's not the way anymore. And I'm very curious to see where that goes. But overall, yeah, I like Tori. I thought her scenes with Robbie were good. I will say that their relationship has been dethroned as the number 1 relationship now, because I do think that Miguel and Sam shine better in this season personally, which we will talk about more when we talk about Miguel. But so I just really liked some aspects of it. I think Tori needed to be a little bit more fair to Robbie, and the whole putting on pause stuff. We've seen this drama in relationships before. She should have been more clear with Robbie, because Robbie was hurt and needed more closure and needed to talk about everything. I'm not saying that I condone any of the other teenage issues that happened, because there are some pretty bad ones, but I still think that Tori needed to do a better job of telling Robbie, hey, I still love you. This is just best for the team. We need to have our heads on a swivel. If we want to do anything in this tournament, we need to fight for our teams. And I just think that putting it on pause, the way she explained it, wasn't strong enough. And I think they could have done a better job of the big 3, the writers, they could have done a better job of executing that, in my opinion. But I like Tori. I think she had a good arc. And she did get some cool fights. She does get some moments where she gets to shine, which is cool. Next up, we got to talk about... Let's talk about Johnny and Daniel, okay? We started this season with kind of a con for me, which was by part 1. I'm sick of Johnny and Daniel. I understand that they're going to have banter with each other, but I feel we've moved past in the show with these two bickering at each other. Who's better? Miyagi-Do's better. Cobra Kai's better. Eagle Fang's better. We don't need to do this anymore. We're at the World Tournament. It used to be funny. Now it's gotten a little old. And I'm glad that by the time we got to at least the 3rd episode, these two patched it up. Well, actually, I would say this by the end of the 7th episode. But the 7th to 8th episode, they patched it up brilliantly and beautifully. And I was very happy about how they handled it. And we will talk about their individual arcs this part individually as well. Which I think we'll talk about Daniel next. So, but I thought their camaraderie and where they came to as characters, acting more as dads than senseis by the end of it, really brought things to a beautiful thing. And I was really impressed by it. We're going to talk more about them individually as we talk about how cool some of the moments that they shared were. So, next up we got to talk about Daniel as a whole. Daniel as a whole, this arc was interesting because Daniel is not in the tournament as much as people would expect because he actually ends up getting kidnapped in episode 7 by Dennis and some goons, and we'll go over who specifically they worked for in a minute. But it was interesting because Daniel's trying to do everything he can while his head needs to be on a swivel and focus on the Sekai Taikai because of his kids and his students. He's more focused on what he discovered in that magical box of Miyagi in part 1. And so we go deeper into the Miyagi rabbit hole. And so he goes and tries to find this sensei, but it ends up being a trap laid out by none other than our boy, Terry Silver, which we're going to get to him when we talk about episode 8 and when we talk about other character arcs. So I love this. I love that Daniel, it was crazy. We've seen Daniel at his lowest point here, and he goes through the ringer here. But what's really beautiful is that they do so many good things with him. He has some great standout fight scenes, including one against the infamous Dennis. And what's super cool about this scene, guys, is Daniel got to use all 3 of his finishing moves from all 3 of the original Karate Kid. So even as an adult, this man is still the Karate Kid. He does a jumping version of a crane kick. He does the drum technique from Karate Kid 2, which he beat Chosen with, and he does the Miyagi-Do kata from Karate Kid 3. So I thought that was pretty cool seeing that in Succession, and I've noticed a lot of people aren't talking about Dennis, but in terms of cool characters coming back, I'm glad they brought in Dennis. And we'll talk about his partner in a minute too when we talk about Silver, but I really liked seeing Dennis. I thought it was awesome, and I'm excited to see if we see him again in part 3 because there's more to do. And we actually got to see him a couple times, which is cool. So that was really nice. I really enjoyed seeing him back, and Daniel and his fight was cool. And Daniel, not only was his arc great in this scene, some of the bickering stuff was a little much, but once Johnny and him came down, to see Daniel off balance the way it was really interesting for his story. I really liked seeing Daniel going to Kreese, thinking Kreese was the one that kidnapped him, and he says, "You really think you can fuck with me?" Like it was awesome. Like, I thought it was great that they gave Hawk an F-bomb and they gave Daniel an F-bomb. Perfect. It was perfect right down to the last minute details. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I really liked where they went with his arc here. And like I said, the fight scenes were great. Loved how they built that out. Loved the dynamic with Kreese. Thought that was fun. And it wasn't what the trailer made us think it was going to be, which was also really cool when the trailer doesn't give us all the pieces of evidence and we get to see surprises. And then we head into our next big character to talk about, which is my favorite character of the show, my boy Johnny Lawrence. Now, Johnny Lawrence has kind of a rough one because he starts out very kind of arrogant with Daniel, but then and he kind of loses his focus and doesn't know how to handle things in the tournament, and kind of thinks yelling at the kids is a good idea because he doesn't really know how to handle it. He's only got Kreese's old teachings, which is not good teachings for him. So, but by the time we get to episode 7, he gets to have an amazing heart-to-heart with Miguel where he calls him his son. And I nearly teared up. This was the most peak acting William Zabka has ever given as Johnny. I can see why he said the scripts were insane and everything was so good when they were writing this, because they were not wrong. It was beautiful. And then you have a moment where he gets to talk to Devin, and he literally goes and tells her that he's going to help share the blame for what happened with Kenny, which I think is just amazing. And then it gets even better because he leaves this beautiful voicemail for Daniel, showing how much he cares about him and how he needs him there with him. And I loved that. I thought it was amazing. There were some funny moments of them both being roommates in the hotel room. Those two sharing a room was funny. Johnny getting mad about a $9 beer. Typical funny moment. And of course, the biggest thing with Johnny is Johnny has himself a new rival. Daniel is no longer his biggest threat. Because this season, not only do we introduce new fighters for the kids, but we have a new villain in Sensei Wolf, played by Louis Tan. Which we'll be talking about him. He's going to get his own section of this review as well. But I wanted to mention him because him and Johnny have a bit of a rivalry. And it's kind of fun how it starts, because you get to see kind of them first. They bicker with words before doing it with their fists. And I liked their conversations. The interactions between them were fun. It's kind of funny because I feel like Sensei Wolf is kind of like the Bud Light to Johnny's Chorus Light. Like they're this two sides of the same coin. Like if Johnny followed all of Kreese's teachings, I think he would be just like Wolf. So it's kind of funny, Johnny looking in the mirror and seeing his worst enemy is actually himself, but it's not actually himself, which I think is really cool. And I'm really excited to see. I think part 3 is going to really go all in on the Johnny and Wolf dynamic. We get some good moments here, and there's even a moment that we'll talk about in the final part of the episode that's pretty awesome. But it was cool. I liked what they did. I love Johnny. I think they did a great job. I liked his acting. And as we expect from Johnny Lawrence, he does get some kick-ass moments, which we'll talk about when we talk about the specific parts of the episodes as well. But I love that. I thought that was great. And then you got to talk about. Well, we'll talk about the new characters a little bit now too. But before we do, I want to dive into our big two. Okay, so our other most important characters that we're familiar with, that everyone knows, we got to talk about, is our Tommy and Jason of the Cobra Kai universe. Which, if you don't know Tommy and Jason, that is a direct reference to the old Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And in some cases, Miguel has always been the Red Ranger. Robbie has always been the Green Ranger. Now, Robbie is now the Red Ranger, or I should say, is now the White Ranger from Power Rangers. So he's reached new evolution, where Miguel is now the Gold Zeo Ranger. And I thought that was really cool, how they really brought those two together, and I really liked how that was handled. But so we were talking about character arcs. Let's talk about Robbie before Miguel first, okay? Robbie had one of the most satisfying arcs we've ever seen. This kid has been literally fucking shit on. Like, from the beginning of the show, what he went through with his dad, his dad not being there for him, all these moments of him, people have taken advantage of him, they've crapped all over him. The boy has lost pretty much every tournament he's been in. The boy deserved his shine. Robbie does not need to win the Sekai Taikai, but he needs to get some respect under his damn name. And one of the things I think that they got to respect him was that he got a win against one of the most vicious and most dangerous competitors we've ever faced. That being Kwon Jae-sun, who we know from part 1 was established as a big threat. He's the new badass Korean Cobra. And their fight was the first they fought the first time, and part of Robbie's arc is they do this with writing all the time to build new characters. In order for Robbie to get his win, they had to break Robbie down first. So they had Robbie literally go through the ringer, had Quan get in his head, beat him physically first, beat him in a challenge, really make the team not believe in him, just constantly lose after lose to build that win up, which I think was brilliant. And then we even had a moment where Robbie went to the bar and saw Quan and Tori and thought they were getting together. So then when he got drunk, he didn't realize that Zara, our other new member of the Iron Dragons, was able to take advantage of him. And that was unfortunate. But also, Robbie was really going through it. But when it came to facing off against Quan, he did so with an amazing amount of effort, and it was one of the greatest fights this show has ever had. I mean, it was brilliant. There was literally so much good stuff in that fight. Like, you had Robbie and Quan just brilliant. Like, you had these two dudes absolutely going crazy and throwing a flurry of kicks. These are two amazing athletes in real life. They brought it all. Tanner is a combination of Schwarzenegger and Stallone with how his physical peak is becoming as a human. And Quan is just an absolute modern day young Bruce Lee. He is amazing with his kicks. A little bit of Jet Li in there. He's just an amazing talent. And these two dudes brought it all. Well, they're not brothers in terms of choreography. This was the Obi-Wan and Anakin of the Cobra Kai universe in the sense of the choreography. If you know, Hayden and Ewan in Revenge of the Sith worked their asses off to get the choreography done perfectly. And this fight delivered. In an episode titled Blood In, Blood Out, it delivered. And it was beautiful. And I loved it. And I was very happy with how it was handled. And Robbie's arc overall, I really liked it. I really thought they did a great job. You know, we see him struggling with Tori. We saw him lose his focus. But man, once it was time to find, once he realized that Tori and Quan didn't sleep together, that bro locked the fucking like nobody's business. Like, he locked in so crazy that he just went off, bro, and it was awesome. I loved it. I loved Robbie's arc. Now, with that being said, we talked about Robbie, and well, Robbie was locked in when it counted, even though he did get dropped by Axel, and we're going to talk about what happened in episode 10 that really set the stage for everything. But first, we got to dive into our main boy. We started this show with Miguel, so in terms of our main primary characters, we had to end with Miguel. Now, Miguel Diaz. This man had one of the most arcs. I mean, yeah, he seemed unfair to Johnny a little bit at times, but, you know, he just really wanted to hear those magical words of being called Johnny's son, which was brilliant. And he felt very sad. He was very scared for Carmen, but Johnny helped him very much, and I loved how that arc was handled. But Miguel in this tournament, he may not be the captain, but Miguel shines bright like a diamond here, because Miguel is the one to literally carry this. He may have had a back injury, but he carried Miyagi-Do on his back through this tournament. We would not be in the finals or the semifinals of the Sekai Taikai if it was not for Miguel Diaz. Miguel Diaz fucking carried this team to victory. Like, and we're not even done with the tournament, but I'm just saying, like, overall scoring points, Miguel got the most. Yes, we had Robbie get points on Quan, but Miguel was popping off, bro. It was awesome. He even has a moment where he looks at Robbie and he goes, "Watch how it's done." And he goes up there on the biggest world stage ever, on a live televised event, which is going crazy, in this tournament. He jumps on top of the big platform while they're doing almost like a King of the Hill style match. And he wipes the fucking floor with these two Dublin Thunder dojo members from like a Scottish dojo. And he just annihilates them. And every single time Miguel fights someone in this season, except for Axel, who is a literal Winter Soldier meets Frankenstein, Ivan Von Drago, motherfucker. This dude carried. He destroyed, and he got to shine so bright, and they did such a brilliant job. I was so impressed with how they handled it. I mean, Miguel is so good. Like, he'll always be one of my favorite characters. I was not disappointed with his arc. I loved how many matches he won. I love how many fights he got. He did so well in the actual tournament stuff. And then when the serious stuff happened, which we'll talk about in a minute, it was great. And look, there are going to be some people that say that because Quan landed a hit on Miguel, that Quan won that fight against Miguel when they did the tag team before Robbie jumped in. No. Miguel would have obliterated that kid. If it was switched and Robbie didn't tag in, Miguel would have absolutely annihilated Quan. I love Quan. Don't get me wrong, I like the character. I think he's cool. But we need to stick to our roots. And I'm sorry, new Cobra Kai ain't crushing the OG Cobra. It ain't happening, bro. But I love Miguel. I thought it was awesome. I loved his arc. Now let's talk about an unexpected part of the story. Kim Da-eun and Chosen. Something I never thought. So, I do think that the whole Kimiko thing is a misunderstanding, as we've seen from many other comedy films. But what I will say is, these two, Chosen is like Darth Maul, if Darth Maul hooked up with Asajj Ventress. And I feel like they did a great job of, like, I never thought these two would have such a great chemistry together. It gave such an amazing nuance and added some gray to Kim's character, which instead of feeling like a total cartoon anime character, it's nice that they made her feel normal. Have you seen her in some of her other movies? I think Elisa Hannah Kim looked like she was having a ton of fun with Chosen. And she had great scenes with Tori as well, but I liked the Chosen and her dynamic. And if we're speaking of Chosen, I know a lot of people might not have liked it. I absolutely loved when Chosen was heartbroken. Drunk Chosen was hilarious. And I enjoyed every aspect of it. It was fantastic. I mean, they delivered on every front here. It was beautiful. So I liked what they did with Chosen. Can't wait to see what they do with them in part 3. And how they continue to pay that forward was brilliant. I mean, I loved the two of them. I loved how they worked together. It was super awesome. And now, we got to talk about the next set of characters. Now, we got to talk about some of our new competitors. So we introduced Maria, a new fighter from the Yellow Panther Dojo. I can't remember what the name of them were. She is formidable and a very interesting character. But, like I said, some of these was meant to have each of our main characters have rivals. Maria was more Sam's rival than Zara was, because Zara was meant for Tori. And I liked how they built that out. I thought Maria was cool. But then talking about like our Cobra Kai's we met in part 1, it was cool seeing Quan and Yoon fully get to see their skills. If we talk about Yoon first, I thought Yoon was nice because while Quan is such an asshole and was such a horrible person, I like how Yoon. Trying to find put my drink. Give me a second, guys. I liked how Yoon Foley was actually nice to Tori. When she was entered into Cobra Kai, Quan wasn't the nicest to her. But Yoon was a nice dude. He was taking Hawk's ass up and down the field, and Miguel laid him out like a pancake, but I still thought he was great. And I don't know if we'll see him in part 3, but it'd be nice to see him, to see if we saw some resolution with his Cobras being used again. I liked his character. Now, let's talk about the new bad boy karate, guys. Let's talk about Quan, okay? Now, you can't talk about Quan without talking about the big thing that happens, but we'll dive into that first. So first, Quan. Quan was a character that we needed in the show from the beginning, because we needed to see a Cobra that was so bad to the bone that the full no mercy philosophy for Cobra Kai existed through one character. And they embodied that well. Dude was a little bit literal asshole. Like, one of my favorite scenes is in episode 6 when we're at the hotel. Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai are introduced to each other. Quan comes right up to Hawk and all the other Miyagi-Dos, and he goes, "So you are the famous Miyagi-Do. I heard about you. I'm not sure why, And then Hawk gets in his face and he goes, well, we'll see how that goes on the mat. And my biggest regrets of this season, I will say, is because we're going to talk about what happened to him in a minute. I hate that we're never going to get to see a Quan versus Hawk fight. I would have loved to see it. It would have been so cool. But we didn't get it, unfortunately. But with that being said, unfortunately, as we're going to talk about later in the review, Quan does die at the end of part 2. So everything we talk about Quan, when I talk about, these are my final thoughts on Quan. My thoughts won't be changing. These are my final thoughts. I enjoyed Quan. He's an interesting character. He was very entertaining. What he said was great. How he got into Robbie's head was great. His fight scenes are incredible. Loved how not only was he a threat to Miguel, Robbie, and Axel, but he was just a massive threat. And when he ended up trying to execute his kick and got petty and decided to go after Robbie and Axel before Axel stopped him, we witnessed tragedy as Quan was killed, similar to what the leaks said, by Kreese's knife that he was carrying, which was such a tragic and shocking scene, which we'll be talking about at the very end of the review when we cover how crazy these events unfolded. But then, so Quan, I really liked Quan. I thought he was great. I'll miss him. I think he was a cool character. Rip Quan, guys. Let's take 5 minutes. Rip Quan. Raise a drink, raise a glass. Quan was a badass, and I hope that this wasn't just for shock value. I hope that this serves a very good purpose to the story. But I hope it affects Daniel and all the other characters. Because if they just killed him for shock value, it's a big L. Because this is a great character. Back to business. As we're rounding out the next characters, let's talk about Zara. Zara's fantastic. So you had the whole Instagram thing. Reina, this was her first big role. She crushed it. She was a powerhouse in this part of the season. Iron Dragon is one of the most ruthless dojos, even more than Cobra Kai, that we've ever seen. And I loved seeing Zara dominate in every competition she was in. Even her rival Maria, she was whooping ass. I mean, she kicked ass in the bow staff competition. She kicked ass in the Skyway competition. She did not lose a single match, and I can't wait to see. And she did have a great rivalry with Tori, which is cool, but I can't wait to see how it develops into a rivalry with Sam in part 3. Really excited to see her back. Fantastic character. Then you have Axel. Now, Axel had amazing scenes with Sam. This is a guy who is Russian, and he's built up to be a monster. Where we find out Sam literally has a scene where she learns that Wolf beats Axel into submission so that he does well in his competitions. But we also get to see Sam and Axel bond, and even though he mistakes her kindness for flirting with him, he still cares about Sam, and I think he could be Sam's protector for part 3 and help her out as a bodyguard in the future. But first, after what he's done and after how he gave Miguel all the looks and stuff, we gotta have Miguel and Axel face off in part 3, which I think it's coming. And we'll talk about why it's coming when we talk about the big thing that happened at the end. So yeah, Axel, great new character. A combination of Winter Soldier meets Frankenstein, and even more, because he's also Ivan Von Drago 2.0. This dude is 7 foot tall, similar to Thomas Ian Griffith, and he is literally an absolute juggernaut. He does not lose a single fight in this part. He is an absolute beast, and I mean that in every sense of the word. And it was so cool. Patrick Lewis did a great job. I can't wait to see him in part 3. I mean, he absolutely obliterated Robbie. The fact he had perfect defense and offense, both Johnny and Daniel were shocked, was incredible. That fight against him, even though it got interrupted by what we'll talk about in a minute, was still awesome. But as we saw from inside the dojo, part 3 is going to give us an even better one. And I can't wait for it. But so then, you move forward, and we got to talk about the return of our boy, Terry Silver, guys. When we saw Terry Silver in that bathtub, and he said, because, Danny boy, what would life be without a few surprises? Because Terry Silver is behind the Iron Dragons, and he is behind Daniel being kidnapped. So Terry Silver is working with Sensei Wolf and Iron Dragons, and Dennis, his old friend. And unfortunately, we did find out that Snake has passed in this show, which I don't know if the actor couldn't come back, or if he was just too old. Whatever happened, it was just unfortunate we didn't get to see both of them united. But hopefully we'll get a mention from Dennis in part 3 of Snake. But it was awesome to see Dennis and Silver working together again. It was awesome to see Daniel get taunted by Silver. And we also got something I didn't think we'd get in part 2, which is during, which we'll talk about when we talk about the big thing that happened. Silver was awesome in this part. We got to see him kick ass. We got to see him fight. We got to see him get amazing new Silver lines, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I love Silver. This show, we needed Silver. I'm glad Silver came back. We needed him. He was missed. He's a much better villain than Kreese, and we needed Silver back in the picture. 100%. And I was glad to have him back, more than anything. Now, we can talk a little bit about Kreese. I was getting a little annoyed of Kreese. He would pop up and just get in Daniel and Johnny's business and just pop out of nowhere. And then we got like the flashback stuff with Kreese, but in the previous seasons. But present day Kreese is just getting a little, I don't know. I'm kind of excited for him and Silver to just outdo each other in part 3, because he is just a little bit on the tad annoying side, as his old villain shenanigans are playing out the way that they are. But we're going to talk about him in a little bit, because there is something that happens with him and Silver that's pretty exciting. Because Kreese very much wants to kill Silver. And there is a moment where he goes, and after Johnny, Chosen, and Daniel come up with a game to trick Kreese into thinking that Silver stole his knife, literally, you get a scene where Kreese walks up to Silver and punches him right in the face in front of everyone in the live audience in the Sekai Taikai, which is awesome. And Silver's reaction is priceless. It's like, I don't know what you mean, John. I didn't do anything. And then he literally like, I'm looking forward to the next time. Like, love Silver. Brilliant. Win. Amazing. Loved how that was done. And then, of course, it's time now to talk about, before we talk about the big events that happen that really make this, before we talk about the things that really drive this story forward, our last big character to talk about is Sensei Wolf. Okay, guys. They brought Louis Tan in to the show, and I knew for a while that when they're bringing him in, he was going to do some amazing things. Sensei Wolf may be one of the best adult fighters we've had in this show next to Chosen. I thought Chosen would never meet a rival that would equal him. Like Silver and him fought, it was cool. I don't think that's his rival. Chosen will probably end up killing Master Kim in part 3 in an epic sword battle, or sword versus size, whatever weapon they choose to put in his hand. But that fight will be short-lived, because honestly, the fight I want is Wolf versus Silver. Wolf was able to withstand both Johnny and Daniel and keep up with them consistently. And Louis Tan plays this character brilliantly. He's able to establish a good rivalry with Johnny, which I can't wait to see expanded in part 3. He's able to show the first intro scene we get of Wolf other than him at the tournament.
Sir, please don't do this.
John Lawrence. One of us is about to have a lot more fun than the other.
Out of my way, asshole. Had enough fun for the day.
Let's go, Sensei. Might actually get a good workout.
Work this out, man.
is in Silver's episode, we find out Hayden, one of the top writers, is Silver's lawyer. He urges Silver not to buy any more dojos, but then Silver goes and buys Iron Dragons when seeing how ruthless Wolf is. And Wolf actually is in a cage match, and he goes Mortal Kombat style on this guy, and he kicks this guy in the throat.
Couldn't you get the 4 seasons? You had to pick this shithole? So, I have some good news. Got the judge to officially throw away your case. Thought that was tough. That Raymond Porter character, you know, the Stingray guy, least credible witness of all time. Yeah, tried to get this kid Burt to testify on his behalf. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in a courtroom. Terry, I gotta say, ever since you've been back in this karate business, you've been acting... I'm just saying, you blew a lot of money on those dojos. You're lucky to have the yacht left. I just don't want you to go on a downward spiral and end up in the morgue like your buddy Snake.
We'll all end up there someday.
Come on, man. Come on, go.
Watch this.
Jesus Christ.
I still have my offshore accounts.
Causing that person to go into cardiac arrest, which was insane. But not only do we get to see him be a tough sensei and be brutal and is very abusive, and is the true definition of evil, we see Wolf just absolutely a beast in combat. Not only in the cage fight scene, but in a scene that happens much later in part 2, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But yeah, overall, all these characters, amazing arcs. Loved what we got with them. They were fantastic. Now let's dive into the big thing. Okay, so like I said, Quan died at the end of this. So basically what happens is, we get, in episode 10, we get this, so we start, basically, the elephant in the room is we get to see, we start episode 10 with Mr. Miyagi actually appearing in front of Daniel after Silver reveals in episode 9 to Daniel that Mr. Miyagi killed someone in the tournament. And it gets verified, and Daniel has a dream of seeing young Mr. Miyagi, and they brought Pat Morita back through deepfake technology, which I thought looked really good, and I was really impressed. And then you see young Miyagi. And so we get a fight scene between Daniel and Miyagi as a dream sequence, which was crazy. And this completely off balances Daniel for all of the end of episode 10 until Miguel talks some sense into both his senseis, Johnny and Daniel, which was brilliant. And then, so talk about the big things after that. Those events set place, we have something crazy happen during the final fight of Axel versus Robbie. Robbie can't score a point on Axel and is getting brutally beaten. And Axel pushes Robbie to another member of the crowd. And the Cobras, because Quan's so petty, Quan and Yoon elbow Robbie. And because of this, a brawl. A massive dojo worldwide, the best fight scene in the history of Cobra Kai, starts. Literally an insane brawl on live television. Every dojo at the Sekai Taikai is involved. Even the announcer, when he tries to stop it, Gunther gets knocked out by the Tiger Strikes, which is a Russian dojo that was basically removed from the tournament for cheating by using performance-enhanced drugs. And so we get these amazing fights. Just a one are just spread around the entire thing, and they're showing different angles of this brawl going out between the different dojos. You have Sam versus a majority of the a female fighter from the Dublin Thunder dojo from Scotland, which is crazy. You have Miguel facing off against Axel, but Axel just keeps obliterating him. To Robbie fighting Quan and Yoon and getting beat on until Miguel jumps in to help out. And then it progresses around. You see Kenny and Devin against multiple different dojos trying to take out as many people as they can. The team up was great. You had Dimitri and Hawk. My favorite Dimitri line, even though Dimitri wasn't my favorite, was Dimitri yelling at the Tiger Strikes, calling him a whiny bitch. And you get to see him just Hawk get the Hawk sound plays, and Hawk and Dimitri, with the help of Spanish Hawk and Ryu eventually, absolutely decimate the Tiger Strikes, which is great. And then there's senseis. Kim Da-eun, we get to see her fight the senseis, but she's outmatched, and then Chosen shows up after we see a funny scene earlier where Chosen says, talking to Daniel to hide up that they were together, he kind of called her a mistake, and then she showed up she sees him show up to help, and she's like, was this a mistake? And he's like, no mistake this time. And so at this brawl, we get Daniel and Johnny rushing to the floor to try and get to the students, making sure the kids are okay, pulling each other off each other. But they get thrown into the mix of this brawl. Not only are kids in this brawl, but adults join in. And when the adults join in, you basically see Dennis versus Daniel. Johnny starts fighting Sensei Wolf, which is crazy because Johnny just wants to get to Robbie, but Sensei Wolf keeps getting in his way. And I was worried for Johnny because there's a moment where Sensei Wolf, showing how brutal Sensei Wolf is, he nearly strikes Johnny in the head. I was worried he was going to get very hurt. But then Johnny, with the help of Daniel, while Daniel joins in to help fight, we get a moment of the two of them fighting Wolf together, and Wolf has this amazing line where he says, oh, looks like I'll make 2-on-1. This is I'll get a good workout in, which is awesome. And you just see how threatening Wolf is as one of the best fighters. He literally goes and beats in Johnny and Daniel, but then Johnny has to leave because he sees Kreese sneaking off, and Johnny's got this whole vendetta, this part of the story with Kreese where he wants to kill him, or so we think. So then he goes, he follows him. Kreese, throughout the mix of this battle, Kreese ends up dropping his knife on the tournament floor. So he's going to confront Silver with the intent to kill him and thinking that he has his knife on him. He looks for it, he can't find it. So we get this amazing fist fight between Silver and Kreese. Silver pulls a Houdini, sneaks behind the curtain, literally freaking decimates Kreese, and right before Kreese is literally inches away from his life, Johnny comes in, saves the day. We get this amazing fight. I never thought we'd get a rematch.
To the end!
I owed you one. Let's go, pretty boy.
Johnny and Silver, Johnny absolutely destroys Terry Silver, and it was amazing. It was one of the most amazing scenes ever. Even Silver says, okay, pretty boy, let's go, and they get to fight again, which is awesome. This time Johnny wins, which is absolutely incredible. The choreography this season is the best. Part 2's choreography is the best choreography we've ever had on the show. The writers, the choreographers, they did a brilliant job. And then this brawl, which was insane, ended with one of the most insane things ever, which is Quan died. And then the cliffhanger for part 2 ends, which is absolutely insane. Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2 was amazing. It's 100% worth your time. I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10, even though my issues, I think it's still a very amazing story. Loved the brawl. Loved all the fight scenes. Loved seeing Dennis. Sensei Wolf is lethal, and I can't wait to see him in Part 3. What did you guys think about Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 2? Share your thoughts. What was your favorite moments? Who were your favorite characters? Let me know. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.